An increase in education across the African continent is progress. An increase in business ownership across the African continent by Africans is progress. An increase in land and property ownership by Africans across the African continent is progress. Given another 10 years, we will have a lot more educated Africans coming out of Africa, a lot more Africans owning businesses, a lot more Africans owning land, owning homes. That in its own is Africa rising. If you can't see that.
Hi lovelies, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Belinda Verse or Belly channel. Don't forget to please subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications so that anytime I upload videos, you will be the first person to be notified. To my returning subscribers, to those people that share my videos, leave commentaries, and educate each and every one of us, you guys are the real MVP. So lovelies, I'm gonna be your today's host, and I have so many statistics to put up here, and we are gonna come out to talk about it. Alright lovelies, let's dive into today's video.
Did y'all know that Africa just launched their own infrastructure, Also, they just launched their own currency, backing their own money with all the billions of dollars in gold mines that they have. They said they want to disconnect with everybody and they want to bring more value to Africa, which everybody get all their resources from. With the internet infrastructure that they did, over 1 billion subscribers, something like that, crazy number, got off Google and went straight to their infrastructure. Man, this is big. This is huge. It's decentralizing the internet, you guys, from Google and United States and other countries. Africa said, we are the motherland. We have the ability we got to stop relying on other countries and other powers to fund us, to control us. I think that's very big. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to see what it's about personally. And yeah, let's go.
Okay, family, let's talk about something that the mainstream doesn't want us to know right now. Right now in Africa, a quiet revolution is taking place. The African Union officially declared all people of African descent around the world as part of Africa's 6th region. That means you, me, our children, our families in the Caribbean, in South America, in Europe. We are not just minorities in America. We are part of a global African majority. Now, in Africa, they're organizing, they're building networks of trade and technology and education. They're creating platforms to connect us back to our roots, to give us not just cultural pride, but political power, economic opportunities, and global influence. Programs in STEM, youth development, business, and international partnerships are working to empower Africans on the continent and Africans abroad. Now, here's the truth. This mission will only succeed if we in the United States play our part, because whether we want to admit it or not, we are one of the most powerful arms of the diaspora. Our culture, our dollars, our voice, they shape the world every single day. But too often we're disconnected, we're distracted, and we're divided. So we can't afford to ignore this. If Africa rises, we rise. If we invest in Africa, we invest in ourselves. That means supporting African businesses. That means building bridges for trade. That means sending children into exchange programs. That means reclaiming our genealogy and demanding that the U.S. government respect our dual identity. African citizens and global Africans. The benefits, they're massive. A stronger Africa means a stronger bargaining chip for Black America. A connected diaspora means we're no longer begging for scraps. We're partners in global trade. And most importantly, it means our children grow up knowing that they don't come from nothing. They come from a kingdom. Brothers and sisters, the African Union is basically calling us home, not to leave America, but to unite across oceans. We've been scattered for 400 years, and now the pieces are coming back together. The only question is, Will we answer the call, or will we let another chance at freedom and power just slip us by? Because make no mistake, unity is the key. And when we unite as one people, no nation, no president, no system can ever deny us again.
I thought we all knew that the earth was alive. I thought we all knew that it's called Mother Earth for a reason. I thought we all knew that the earth was a living organism and that's why we don't pollute it. I thought we all knew. But scientists are just puzzled about how South Africa is rising. The land is rising out of the ocean. And they are so puzzled, and they're saying that it's because the land is lighter, all this nonsense, anything but the earth is waking up. The earth is moving. The earth is moving. Like, the earth is a organism. It is alive. It breathes. It does a whole lot of things that we normally just don't see or don't look at as, oh, that's the earth breathing, or that's the earth cleansing itself, or that's the earth, whatever. Just like our body, we are one with this earth. So if our body does certain things to cleanse, if our body has to breathe, if our body has different things that are there to carry out certain functions, so does the earth. When are they going to understand that the earth is alive? It is rising because the earth is waking up, honey. Come on. All of that schooling, all of that brain, and you're not using it, or at least you want us to think you're not using it.
Today, I want us to reflect on the origins of Africa Day, what it really means, and why today and every day should remind us of the incredible resilience, strength, and promise of the African continent. This isn't just about celebrating one day a year. It's about taking pride every single day in who we are, what we've accomplished, and the opportunities ahead of us. Now let's talk about Africa's legacy, because trust me, the world needs to know. Africa is the birthplace of civilization. Let that sink in. From the Great Pyramids of Egypt to the libraries of Timbuktu, we've been leaders in innovation, culture, and science. But despite that brilliance, despite the greatness, we've been sidelined in the world of narrative. And that's not just me saying it. This is fact. Africa has been the birthplace of some of the world's most powerful empires. Think the Great Mali Empire. Think ancient Egypt. Think Great Zimbabwe. Yet our contributions have too often been buried, erased, or misrepresented in the global conversation. But here's the thing. We don't need validation from anyone. Our contributions to the world are undeniable. From philosophy to medicine, mathematics to art, Africa has shaped humanity in ways that cannot be overlooked. And we will continue to lead. Our influence stretches far beyond the continent, reaching into the diaspora. From boardrooms to the entertainment industry, Africa's impact is felt across the globe, and its power is simply undeniable. The fact that Africa remains the cradle of humanity tells you everything you need to know about the power that we hold. So we may not always get the credit we deserve, but trust me, Africa is not only a cornerstone of history, it's the present and future.
I just discovered that Africa has now launched its own internet, and man, I must tell you, it is such an interesting time to be alive. Of course, when I heard the news, I had to go online, do my own readings, do my own findings, and make sure that what I'm hearing is actually real news, right? And I'm still keeping my eyes on things, but I was able to find a few articles, but one in particular that was able to help me break things down. I have a few takeaways from this article, and I'll link it in the comments, so if you want to read it, it'll be right there. The first thing I learned from this article is that basically it is going to help protect data coming out of Africa. So for example, when you're sending an email from one African country to another African country, apparently it routes to overseas countries before it actually gets to the other African country you are sending the email to, which I never knew, and I think is absolutely bonkers. Now, with this new internet, it is going to go from one African country directly to another African country. The second takeaway for me from this article was that it is going to be more cost efficient to run the search engine as opposed to other search engines like Google. Because we don't have to rely on countries overseas, it is going to cost less to actually run the service. Again, this is based off information that I am getting from this article. I'm going to try my best to keep up with what is going on to see that this is actually true. But if this is true, what I am reading is actually true, I'm telling you that this is pretty exciting, because for me, the more access we can give to the youth and in letting them know that there is so much out there in the world that can be beneficial to their lives, and they can have access to that through the internet, because expensive internet is such a roadblock, I'm telling you now. But there's gonna be easier access, or I'm hoping that there will be easier access for the schools, for the youth, for work in general, for everyday people in Africa, and I'm living for it. And just independence in all facets of life, like all round freedom, really, economically, through the internet, whatever it may be. Freedom for Africa, truly freedom from the top to the bottom, is exactly what I'm excited for. And honestly, I can't wait to see where this goes. Now, please don't forget, please make your donations to communities that are impoverished and people who are displaced and unhoused in Africa through the link in my link tree. Please don't let this video disappear into noise. All safe hands on deck.
There is no African American culture here in America without African culture. Because at the end of the day, African American culture is just another iteration of African culture. Like, go ahead and think about it. Look at the African tribal dances. I look at the dances we created here in America. Hip hop, crumping, stepping, and juking. That's not just random, y'all. That's literally primal DNA at work. That's cultural memory flowing through us because of our literal connection to the African people. Even the way that we formed gangs as black people here in America is that a translation of how the tribes were formed in Africa. Even the way that we actually gang bang in America is the way that they actually exist as tribal people in Africa. Instead of using African tribal symbols, we just used what America gave us. Sports logos, the same hoods and streets and blocks that they redlined us into became our literal territory. Different colors, rags with specific patterns that represent your specific gang. It's the same principle and practice that African tribes used. It came to cloth, beads, and literal body paint to distinguish themselves. The system literally tried to destroy our roots, but our roots are embedded too deep within us. So of course it was always going to translate and come out as something different. Our version of African culture as African Americans living in America was developed because of our proxy to white people. That pressure of false inferiority made our iteration raw, street, and survival driven. But don't get it twisted, it's still African. To put it in the most simplest terms for you guys, I want you guys to visualize a wall of different paintings. In each of these paintings are the different African cultures, different African tribes and traditions. And then amongst those, you have one picture that has all the other pictures incorporated within it. That is African American culture. And that's what makes African American culture special, not different.
So I came across this British man talking about the British economy collapsing, and I was like,
When this collapse comes, and it's going to come, we in the UK are going to need to have some serious reflection. We're going to have to rely on these nations that we've been stealing from for years.
what do you mean by you're going to have to rely on people you've been stealing from? What kind of statement is that? How can you rely on people you've been stealing from?
Because we need them.
Yeah, we know that. You know you need us. But guess what? We don't need you. We never did.
Do you think in the next decade, as African countries are rising and getting more powerful, and the Western countries that had them under their heel for so long, like the UK where I live, are on the way down and their economies are collapsing, what help do you think we're going to get from those countries that are becoming more powerful?
Help? You will get no help. None. We're going to sit and watch. We're going to watch y'all drown like the Titanic. Yeah, we're going to be Rose. You're going to be Jack. The only thing we're going to do is watch. We're going to watch y'all drown. That's what we're going to do. Maybe, take a couple selfies.
We need to import. That's why we've stolen so much history.
Speaking of the stuff that you have stolen, are you planning to give them back? Are you planning to empty your museums and give them back? Because we want our stuff back. All of it. And that includes the gold. You give it back, and maybe we won't take as many selfies.
Especially if there's absolutely no apologies whatsoever.
Y'all can apologize. I don't think it's gonna change anything really. I mean, it'd be nice to watch y'all apologize as you're sinking. Yeah, you can apologize.
And as far as I can tell, this country doesn't apologise for jack shit. The reason it doesn't apologise is because if it apologised for the stuff that it's done, it'd have to start giving back all of the stuff that it's stolen.
At that point, it's really not gonna be hard to get it back. You're just gonna, hand it over because you're gonna need stuff. We'll take it back, don't worry. Don't worry.
And we're going to have to, in the UK, in the West, really start looking at our place in the world and really start looking as to whether we really do value the things that we say we do.
Every time I see a white person talk about Africa and they're like, yeah, there's a lot of corruption in Africa, I always look at them funny. I'm like, do you know that corruption is an English word, right? So if corruption exists in the English dictionary, don't you think that white people also do corruption? So I'm loving the fact that all these European countries are like collectively collapsing at the same time. I love it. I love it. Shout out to Africa. It took some time, but we're getting there. People who thought that Africa will never be anything, we are about to prove y'all wrong. And whoever turned their back on Africa better stay wherever you are.
I saw this post where Iran's supreme leader Khamenei says European colonizers stripped Africa of its culture, identity, wealth. And you know what? He wasn't lying, because that is exactly what Europe did. They stole our gold, ivory, bronzes, and even our people. They cut borders across the continent with no regard for history or humanity. They taught us to hate our own names, to see our languages as primitive, to abandon our scripts like Nsibidi, Bamun, and Adinkra. They burned kingdoms, executed leaders, and filled their museums with the trophies of our blood. That is the legacy of Europe in Africa. So, at first, I said, yes, that's true. Khamenei is right. Europe did that. But then I noticed something weird. The post had a date, October 5, 2000. And I thought, wait a minute, 25 years? I mean, that felt off. 25 years is a long time for someone to misquote anyone, right? So I went to fact check it myself, as I always do. And the truth is, Khamenei didn't say this back in 2000. This is actually a brand new post from August 2025 on his official X account. So whoever posted that old date, whether accident or design, is misleading. It makes the whole thing look like old wisdom when it's really just politics of today. It is fresh, which makes the timing and his intent all more interesting, because now the question becomes, why is he saying this? Why now? What's the point of recycling Africans' pain at this particular moment? Why is the Iranian supreme leader suddenly speaking for Africa? What does he want from us? You see? Because if we should be honest, right? Khamenei has no local standing whatsoever to lecture Africans on what was stolen from us. He has none whatsoever, none. Because Iran itself is sitting on the ruins of its own erased identity. Before Islam was forced on Persia through jihad, there was Zoroastrianism, a rich and advanced civilization with its own culture and worldview. That also was colonization. That was colonization. And what happened? It was erased, colonized, Islamized. Everything he accuses Europe of doing to Africa happened to his own people through Arab conquest and forced religious change. So for him to point fingers at Europe while standing on a land whose original identity was crushed by an Arab Islamic conquest is the height of irony for me. So I don't buy the performance. Africans don't need pity speeches or social media posts from the East or the West. We know what was stolen from us. We carry the scars of the slave trade, the partition of Africa, the loot in European museums, the plantations, the broken systems designed to keep us dependent. But we also know the cure isn't in Tehran, London, or Paris. It's here in Africa with us. What matters is that we name our wounds ourselves and we choose how to heal them. Not Iran, not Europe, not America, us. Us, Africans. Our healing, our rebuilding must be written in our own hands. Our tongues, our own vision of the future, not borrowed sympathy, not borrowed solidarity. They should be ours. So yes, Khamenei spoke the truth about Europe. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking he's an ally of Africa. His concern is not our liberation, it's political positioning. And Africans must stop being swayed by convenient sympathy from leaders who have also benefited from erasing others. We don't need Iran's pity, Europe's apology, or Americans' approval. Africa is not begging for validation. Africa is rising on its own terms. And if the world is uncomfortable with that, good. It's a good thing. We don't need your approval. We don't need your pity. We don't need your social media sympathy post. No. Africa is rising. And to my African brothers and sisters,
I mean, if you get mugged on the street and the thief takes all your money, but he gives you back $1, do you feel like he just gave you charity? Do you thank him for that? Are you in his debt now because he was so kind as to give you a tiny fraction of your own money back to you? I mean, seriously, call this so-called aid, call it what it really is. It's a robbery rebate. It's an insult. It's an insult. This is where they won't teach you in so-called development studies. Total American so-called aid to Africa, the whole continent, is roughly around $12 billion per year, between 10 and 12. If that sounds like a lot to you, let me put it in some kind of perspective, a little bit of perspective. The big 7 AI tech companies just spent $100 billion in the first quarter of 2025 just on data centers. That's $1 billion per day spent by just 7 companies in America, NVIDIA, OpenAI, and so on. The entire continent of Africa gets $12 billion, 12, of so-called aid from America. Do you understand that's like 1/6 of 1% of the U.S. budget? That's like 0.17% of the U.S. budget. That's not even a crumb. It's a crumb of a crumb. And the truth is, even that measly 12 billion, most of that, you don't even actually get that yourselves in Africa. Most of that goes right back to them. So what are you even talking about? U.S. aid, American aid. The United States pretends to give $10 to $12 billion a year across the whole African continent. Health programs through, PEPFAR, some measure of food relief, military training, and so on. A few USAID NGOs, etc., etc. But every dollar is subject to procurement regulations. They force African countries to buy American goods. It's tied to privatization clauses written by the IMF. And it's tied to basically a geopolitical loyalty oath to adhere to America's priorities in Africa. Every penny is either to buy American goods or to sell your assets to America or to sell your politicians to America. Meanwhile, the real money moves in the opposite direction. Oil, minerals, cocoa, coffee, on and on. Exxon, Chevron, Cargill, They strip the raw natural wealth out of Africa, and then they wire the profits back home, and then they hide from taxes offshore. In 2022 alone, U.S. companies imported $37 billion worth of African crude, with almost no local value added. That's between $90 and $120 billion every year that's taken from you just in crude oil and unpaid taxes. And for that $12 billion you're supposed to shut your mouth, look at that. $12 billion coming in, $120 billion going out. They take 10 times as much as they so-called give back.
Africa is standing up to Western imperialism. Namibia recently announced that anyone coming from mostly Western countries who wants to enter will require a visa to do so. Now, we need to recall that Namibia is quite a small country. It only has a population of 3 million people, and yet even Namibia is finding ways to resist the West. The reason the president of Namibia announced this policy was because of a lack of reciprocity. In other words, while Westerners can come into Namibia as tourists and stay as long as they want without a visa, Namibians who want to go to Western countries face border control, visa requirements, and often restrictions on their entry. Now, I call this a form of anti-colonial resistance, and the reason for that is because let's recall that Namibia was, like so many African countries, a colony. It was a German colony, and it was also actually the site of one of the first modern-day genocides. And yet the Western countries that benefited from colonialism continue to hoard this wealth. The money has not been returned to Africa, and that is one of the reasons why Africa remains underdeveloped. And I think we need to remember that one of the few ways that Africans, for instance, can get even a small share of this revenue is by traveling to Europe and going there to work. That's actually a form of reparation, we could say. In other words, immigration is a form of also colonial resistance. And yet the West denies these very people who have been, had their wealth extracted, who have been colonized, the right to enter. So from Namibia's perspective, why not give the West a bit of its own medicine? Now, I know what some people might say. The first comment might be regarding the tourism industry. And to be honest, if you actually look at studies, countries that rely on tourism, they have high rates of poverty and inequality. In other words, the tourism, the money that comes in, pretty much stays at multinational hotels, and the money stays at a couple key sites within the countries. It's not really distributed that well. So stopping tourism is not going to actually affect, in my opinion, most Namibians there. The second thing people might say is, well, by having these border restrictions, by having visa requirements, isn't Namibia just doing what the West does? In my opinion would be that I do hope for one day a borderless world, but we also need to understand that what Namibia is doing is not the same as the West. They're trying to put the pressure on in order to hopefully one day extract some of the benefits that the West has taken away from them. I think that makes sense, and I think that is an exercise of African sovereignty, and I think that is a form of resistance. Go Namibia, go Africa, you got this, you're showing how it should be done.
Africa is building its own internet, and it could change the world. For years, almost every click, message or video in Africa had to travel through Europe or America before coming back. And that made the internet in Africa slower, more expensive, and kept African data in foreign hands. Now that's changing. The African Union has launched the Continental Internet Exchange, a new digital backbone that keeps African traffic inside Africa. Nairobi, Lagos, and Cape Town are becoming the hubs of this network. But here's where it gets even bigger. Country by country, the continent is rewriting the rules of connectivity. In Kenya, Google's Umoja cable is creating the first direct fiber optic link from Africa to Australia. In Nigeria, giant data centers in Lagos are processing traffic locally instead of sending it overseas. In South Africa, Terraco's hubs and the Peace cable are turning the country into a digital gateway. In Ghana, open source platforms are powering government services. And in Somalia, ministries are connecting securely through a national GovNet system. Even satellite internet is part of the shift. Airtel Africa has teamed up with Starlink to connect remote villages that cables can't reach. This isn't about faster Wi-Fi, it's about digital sovereignty. Africa shaping its own technological destiny. Instead of relying on Silicon Valley, when African nations take control of their internet, it shifts the balance of power worldwide. If you're in Africa, have you noticed the change in speed or cost where you live? And if you're outside Africa, would you trust an internet led by Africa over Google or Meta? This isn't just the Africa you're not shown. This is the Africa designing the world's next digital frontier.
Alright, did you know that right now in Africa, something historic is taking place? For the first time in modern history, African nations are actively building their own internet infrastructure separate from the dominance of Google, Silicon Valley, and the West. At the same time, leaders are introducing a gold-backed currency, signaling that the continent no longer wants to be chained to the dollar system or the euro system. This is not a small story. This is not some side note. This is a systemic shift in global power. For decades, Africa has been described as the land of potential but never the land of realization. The resources are there. Oil, cobalt, diamonds, uranium, gold. The people are there. 1.4 billion human beings, the youngest population on earth. The markets are there. A growing middle class hungry for technology, business, and model opportunity. But the bottleneck has always been control. Control of information, control of currency, control of infrastructure. Think about it. Almost every African country depends on server owned by US or European companies to run its internet traffic. That means a single decision in Washington, a single sensation from Brussels, a single corporate policy at Google or Meta can cut off millions from communication, commerce, and culture. The continent has been plugged into the global web, but never on its own terms. Until now, this African internet infrastructure, decentralized, independent, and subscription-based, is being positioned as a digital sovereignty project. Report says over 1 billion subscribers signed up in record time. That is not just a number. That is an exodus. That is people leaving behind Google's monopoly and choosing an African-built alternative. And if that sounds impossible, remember, China built the Great Firewall, its own app, its own system. Russia is building Runlet. Why should Africa not do the same? Now let's talk currency. For over 70 years, the US dollar has been the global reserve currency. That meant African nations, when they wanted to trade with each other, often had to convert their local money into US dollar first. That is like two neighbors needing permission from someone across the ocean just to exchange goods on the same street. It absorbs its colonialism in digital form, and when African leaders talk about disconnecting from that system, they are saying enough is enough. This new African currency, reportedly backed by billions of dollars worth of gold reserves, is the boldest economic experiment on the continent since independence. Gold backing means real value. It means not printing money out of thin air like the Federal Reserve does. It means challenging the IMF, the World Bank, and Western leaders who have kept Africa in debt traps for decades. If it works, it's not just a new currency, it's a new paradigm. But let's pause. Why does this matter for Black Americans, for Afro-Caribbeans, for the diaspora? Because the African Union declared all of us, yes, you, me, our children, as part of African Cis region. That means this revolution is not just happening on the continent, it's happening in our blood, it's happening in our history, it's happening in our identity. When African builds its own internet, it's not only Africans in Nigeria, Ghana, Kenya, or South Africa who benefit. It's African Americans who can now bypass the Western chokehold on narratives, who can connect directly to creators, educators, and innovators across the ocean. It's children in the Caribbean who can access platforms without being filtered by Silicon Valley biases. It's Black businesses in London and New York who can trade directly with Africa on an African currency without begging Wall Street for permission. Think about how the narrative changes. For centuries, we have been told we come from nothing, that Africa is poor, corrupt, and broken. But imagine your child logging onto an African internet, paying with African digital gold, streaming African media, buying African products, and learning African history told by Africans themselves. That changes psychology, that changes confidence, that changes the entire story of who we are. Of course, the mainstream media doesn't want to talk about this. They want to dismiss it. They want to laugh at it, like they laughed when BRICS talked about creating a currency backed by gold. But notice the pattern. They always laugh at revolutions until revolutions succeed. They laugh at China. Now China is the world's second largest economy. They mock crypto. Now Bitcoin is forcing governments to create central bank of digital currency. They ignored Africa, but now Africa is rising. And let's not romanticize it. This won't be easy. Western unions have a long track record of sabotaging African progress, from the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in Congo to the overthrow of Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana, to the destabilization of Libya when Gaddafi proposed to a gold-backed African dinner. Every time Africa has tried to unify and break free from dependency, external forces have struck back. We must expect resistance. There will be cyber attacks on African servers. There will be sensation. There will be propaganda campaigns trying to discredit the new currency. There will be puppet leaders within Africa itself who sabotage progress for their own selfish gain. But here's the difference. This time, Africa is not alone. The diaspora is watching, the diaspora is connected, and the global balance of power is shifting. The US dollar is already under pressure as BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa create alternatives. China is already Africa's largest trading partner. Russia is supplying Africa with security and energy deals. The Middle East is pivoting away from the petrodollar. If Africa stands firm, it can align with this shift and finally sit at the global table not as a beggar, but as a partner. Let's break down further. Technology. Africa building its own internet is the foundation of sovereignty. Whoever controls the server controls the speech. Whoever controls the data owns the future. For the first time, Africa has a chance to own both. Economy. A gold-backed currency makes African wealth real, not borrowed. It also forces the world to respect African resources. No more exploitation disguised as foreign aid. Diaspora power. Black Americans spend over $1.7 trillion annually. Imagine even 10% of that redirected to African markets through African platforms on an African currency. That is not charity, that is power. Global leverage. If Africa controls its own internet, its own money, and its own trade routine, the West can no longer dictate terms. Suddenly, Africa can say no. Suddenly, Africa can walk away. And the cultural impact, huge. Africa is the birthplace of civilization, the cradle of humanity. The West has always borrowed from us, music, fashion, art, language, but controlled the distribution. With an African internet, African culture goes global without filter. The world gets the source, not the imitation. Now, will African governments align? No. There will be divisions, there will be corruptions, there will be leaders who sell out, but revolutions are never clean. They are messy, complicated, and full of contradictions. What matters is the direction of movement, and right now, the movement is toward independence. So brothers and sisters, this is the moment a billion people unplugging from Google and plugging into Africa's own system, a currency backed by Africa's own gold, a diaspora recognized as part of the African Union. History is moving in our direction. The only question left is, will we answer the call? We will invest, will we connect, will we build bridges instead of walls? Because, make no mistake, if Africa rises, we rise, and if we ignore this moment, we may never get another chance.
And if you watched up to this extent, don't forget to please leave me your own thought in the comment section of what you think of this video. And please do not forget that we do not support any form of bullying and harassment. We are just here for educational and informative purposes. So lovelies, why not just share your thought? Subscribe to this channel if you're yet to do that, and I will see you lovelies when I upload the next one.